Hello and welcome to the final episode in this season of Building Africa's Prosperity. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, Africa's prosperity depends on economic growth, poverty alleviation, and closing the inequality gap. Now, South Africa's latest economic data paints a pretty bleak picture of the second quarter of 2020. Now, although this was inevitable, it reflects the national cost of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Now, joining me now to discuss this and to check us where we are is Dr. George Tsibani, an institutional capacity development and monitoring specialist, and Siya Biniza, a country specialist at the DBSA. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. If I can start off with you, Dr. Tsibani. I mean, you saw the figures this week for the economy. It paints a pretty bleak picture. Just give us an idea, and I'll ask you both this, where you think we are right now.
We are facing a situation where we need to have an inclusive economic development program where private sector must be taking an active role. Government on its own cannot deliver any program. So we need a partnership with the private sector, and as well as the strategic role of the development finance institution like DBSA, your World Bank, should come to the fore to address the post-COVID-19 scenario.
Now, Siya, you were in Treasury in your time before your current job. You've been very much in the engine room of economic policy in this country. How concerned are you about exactly where we are now post-COVID-19 or during COVID-19?
Sure. Look, I think it's a very dire situation, and we must be considerate of the fact that this is before COVID as well. We entered a technical recession in December 2019, and this has extended up to the second quarter of this year. And what that means is that we are going to see a worsening of our socioeconomic metrics in terms of, increases in unemployment. Definitely, the poverty and inequality is about to get worse. It's a very significant concern, and I think the big challenge here is that we can no longer go according to the conventional approach of just either trying to stimulate the economy from a fiscal side or whatever it might be. We need to actually be cognizant of both the economic performance but also the social dynamics in order to avoid any rising political tensions, which would take us even further backwards. So I think it's a critical moment. I think South Africa finds itself at a crucial junction, at a crossroads, really, where things could turn either way, worse or better.
Now, Dr. Tsibani, you've written a book on how cities should be planning in Africa for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Just give us an idea of how difficult those predictions are, bearing in mind a lot of the catastrophic things that countries like South Africa have to face.
Thank you very much. In fact, our view is that in this book, I've looked at restoring pride through wealth creation. South Africa cities and towns were formed through what I call the forts or the mining industrialization. So they were not planned according to spatial development, human settlement issues. Now, most of them need to rehabilitate it into cities that are supposed to absorb becoming economic hub, and they also must drive the growth and development, as Siya was saying. They also have to address the issue around poverty. They must create local economic development enterprises as well. So smart cities, in my view, are the future entities that can drive growth and development in South Africa and in Southern Africa as well. Remember that South Africa is interdependent with other Southern African states, particularly in the case of Johannesburg, for instance, or Gauteng. We are largely dependent on water, and water is key in terms of economic growth. It's a catalyst for economic growth and development. Now, what we need to do as South Africans, in my book, I have highlighted the need for water nexus to be linked to our Central Development Initiative. One of those is that you deal with water. You also look at energy alternative solutions. You look at agricultural. We do know, Chris, by now, by 2030, we'll have a shortage of 30% food shortage in the country. And therefore, that means that immediately government with private sector must come out with a program that must deal with youth employment opportunities. It must also come out with the food processing processes that are required. We can't be having the Arab land that we have, beautiful landscape that we have. We should be coming with technology to deal with that. Now, the book says water must be linked to energy, energy must be linked to agriculture, agriculture must lead to land reforms. Land reform must be leading to health initiatives, and technology must lead us in terms of how we deal with issues of evaporation, how we deal with issues of food processing, and how to deal with issues of water nexus in general. So shortly speaking, this is the wealth that we are talking about, is water, energy, agriculture, land, technology, and health. Now, COVID-19 showed us very well that without looking at health facilities in the country and its maintenance, we may have to face some consequences coming out. And Siya have highlighted that very well in his opening speech. Now, for us to deal with this, we need also to look at heritage sites. That's what the book is saying. Heritage sites, those heritage sites can lead us to what we call liberation routes. And this is applicable throughout Africa. We're talking about pride, production, which is the P. The R will be your reindustrialization initiatives that we need to look at. The I will be your innovation that we need to work on. And then your D is domestication. We can't be relying on importing food at the moment. We need to produce food in the country itself. And then we support SMEs. That is the enterprise development gap that we need to address. I mean, the Asian tigers have survived this era and have come out of recession that we have through supporting SMEs. That enterprise development is our key role, and our president have been very, very vocal around that. Now, that to me is what I call nation building plan. That nation building plan must be rooted on water nexus, as well as restoration of pride, which is your reindustrialization using innovation, innovative ideas.
Okay, Siya Biniza, if I could go to you at the DBSA, I mean, all of these issues and recovery plan, which I want to talk a little bit more about with the president in a minute, but this country in particular is particularly hobbled because it has to also deal with this vast inequality that exists in this country to this day, as well as rebuilding. How difficult is that going to make it?
Sure. Look, it's a very, very mammoth challenge. And I think the government has taken a good stride in this in terms of having a very clear strategy on how we're going to respond to COVID, having it linked to the risks as well, which has enabled us to really minimize the negative impact. South Africa is not alone in terms of the economic shock and the contraction we faced in the second quarter. But through the sort of coordination of government, we were able to respond and minimize the impact of COVID. And I think moving forward, a lot of our recovery is going to depend on this. Government has issued out a new infrastructure-led plan for economic recovery for the country, and it's going to require not just government's, judicious implementation of this plan, but also partnership with private sector and also civil society in order to have a sort of complete approach and make sure that the implementation of these plans is coordinated. And I think, yes, you're rightfully saying, we've got a mammoth task ahead of us, and it requires everyone to pull up their sleeves and be part of, contributing what they can in terms of the infrastructure-led recovery plan. And the DBSA plays a central role in this as the administrator and manager of, the 100 billion infrastructure fund that was announced by the president as part of our economic recovery plan. Chris?
That money. But if I just come back to you, Dr. Tsibani, just a point, everyone agrees. I mean, I agree that Africa should be growing more food. The rest of the world is covering its arable land with car parks and concrete. this continent's got fertile soil. I've done stories on people getting into commercial farming here, Zimbabwe, Zambia, all over Southern Africa. But one of the things that comes through is that a lot of the young generation coming up, they prefer to live in cities, they prefer to work in industry, they prefer corporate jobs than actually putting the plow into the soil. How are we going to change this idea?
We have started, Chris, with that. Remember, the president had a program called YES program, and that is Young Youth Enterprise Development Initiative that we have. We have about 25 sitters in South Africa, which is called Education and Training Authorities. And all of those ones look at skills development and skills revolution adaptable to our conditions that we have. And for me, that's very critical in terms of addressing some of the paradigm shift and the shift that is required in terms of addressing the programs that we have. For instance, talking about is very critical. When we started with community water supply and sanitation program in 1994, people said that to Professor Karasmal that we were not going to be addressing these issues. And for him, he came out with a concept called BOT process: build, operate, train, and transfer. All the misconception and myth about agriculture is such that they don't understand the concept behind agriculture and agrarian revolution. Now, that's what we need to work on. And secondly, to add to what Siya was saying, is that we have an Indian Ocean, also have the Atlantic Ocean. And if we're to use it as mapping exercise for new engineers to work on the ocean economy, because ocean economy and agriculture can add value in terms of attracting the youth towards agricultural development. And I believe that in the olden days, most of us, for instance, we can start in school. In the olden days in schools, we have our own garden plots. We have the vegetables. We're very proud of that. And until that was taken out of schools, it is a mental change that we need to look at. Hence, I'm saying, Chair, that we need to look at this program. Let's link water with energy and food. And once we have put that and make it an attractive program using what I call build, operate, train, and transfer, we'll make an impact, Chris.
Okay, Siya, now if I could go back to you at the DBSA, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people out there watching this show are asking the question, you're going to administer this 100 billion infrastructure fund. In broad terms, what are you going to do with that money to improve the strength of the economy?
Well, the DBSA offers, services across the whole spectrum of infrastructure value chain, from planning and project preparation, where we doing feasibility studies, making sure that there are enough bankable projects for the investments to take place. One of the critiques we found in Africa is that in spite of despite the huge deficit in terms of infrastructure and the need for investment, there aren't sufficient prepared projects. And so DBSA plays a crucial role there through its project preparation unit, where they do all the feasibilities in order to prepare bankable projects. In addition to that, we also do the financing. Now, this is where the DBSA plays a catalytical role, where we catalyze private sector funds, third-party development finance institutions to also participate in terms of the infrastructure financing. And what this helps is with sharing or spreading of the risk and ensuring that the projects that are being prepared have adequate financing for their implementation. And I think beyond that, our infrastructure delivery unit then oversees the delivery of projects, but not only in terms of timely delivery and at efficient costs. We also ensure that there's a developmental impact in terms of the projects that are delivered. We've got now a recently approved development results framework, which is able to ensure that on each project we're involved with, we understand the developmental impact in terms of job creation, in terms of poverty alleviation, and can actually measure and quantify that. And so this is the entire value chain of the infrastructure planning and implementation that DBSA plays a critical role across, Chris.
Okay, Dr. Tsibani, now come to you now. In this time as well, one of the questions that's been raised during COVID-19, a lot of business has suffered, as we've seen. The economy is shrinking here in South Africa, but some companies have done well, particularly tech companies and the like. There's a school of thought that says maybe some of the private companies with healthy balance sheets should be putting forward capital to be blended with public money to actually rebuild the economy for the good of everyone, including their business. What do you think about that idea?
Absolutely, Chris. We need to do that. We have been in a number of sessions with organized business. Organized business, which include BBC, BUSA, NPI, and others in South Africa, have come forward to government to say, we are prepared to partner with you to deal with these issues. And part of that was that an inclusive business plan for South Africa have been developed, which provide a lot of synergies to what Siya was talking about in terms of DBSA, where you have transboundary funding mechanisms and initiatives that can create more large-scale type of approach. Secondly, is the issues of operation and maintenance. For instance, I do believe that that should be done by private sector. For instance, your municipalities do not have the competencies to some extent to deal with operation and maintenance of water infrastructure. Imagine if you have a 25-year concession with a private sector investment on that. You'll be injecting revenue in the municipality. You will also be able to deal with the issue of youth employment and opportunities and mentoring what I call young professionals in the field of infrastructure and engineering solutions. I would like to add also, Chris, is that these partnership models should really be focused on and implemented, particularly in the Southern Africa, so that we can talk about regional economic development. Regional economic development, then, if you read my book, it also talks to issues of social and economic cohesion. There's an interdependence, for instance, between the Eastern Cape province and Lesotho, and KZN and Lesotho, Swaziland and Lesotho. So that interdependence has to deal with issues of cross-border and cross-funding and transboundary funding mechanism. There's no time for isolation between the countries. We need to have this I'm very happy that DBSA actually is the institution that can coordinate all of this. We want to prioritize green solution as well, because in my book, one of the issues that have deteriorated a lot is the water quality in the country, between the countries. And therefore, green solutions are critical in terms of delivering on sustainable development, Chris. So partnership is the solution that we have. Infrastructure investment is a solution that we need to have. And this must lead to what I call build, operate, train, and transfer, for us to restore pride and also for us to create wealth.
If I can come straight back to you, Siya, at the DBSA. Again, what sort of innovative ways do you think you can leverage private capital and bring it into action on behalf of one of the biggest and key economies on the African continent?
Look, I couldn't agree more with what Dr. Tsibani said. Partnerships is definitely the way forward. Yeah, as the DBSA, we've been crucial in actually establishing the Triple P framework for South Africa. Triple P meaning public-private partnership framework. And one of the key ways that we implement this is obviously linked to how we finance our projects. Our syndication team is constantly looking to create new products that not only crowd in private sector funding, but also ensure see-through to the project level in order to ensure that there is developmental impact, and beyond that, ensuring that the infrastructure is delivered efficiently and on time. A recent World Bank study found that the average that developing countries should be aiming for in terms of public-private partnerships is at around 18% of funding. So for example, if we say the South African infrastructure funding would cost, let's say, $100, what you'd want is that $18 of that should come from private sector. And that then ensures that not only do you have a project that is going to ensure delivery, but also efficiently financed, but ensuring that there's also planning and operational efficiency to ensure that the project is functional, but also being maintained in an efficient manner to ensure that we get the most out of our infrastructure throughout its lifestyle, Chris. Its life cycle.
Dr. Tsibani, I can come back to you as well. I mean, you know, the DBSA is obviously playing a role here, but what I want to get from you is an idea of how all of this activity and all these efforts here fit into the rest of the region, because as you know, everything in every country in Southern Africa is dependent in some way to what happens here in South Africa. How do you think it all fits in?
We need to look at the institutions, for instance, revitalize the institutions that we have. For instance, there's a very good relationship between Lesotho and South Africa when it comes to water treatment and water supply and distribution. That is the Lesotho Highland Water. And that is very critical because for me, Chris, I'm sorry to say this, for me, whatever we do, whatever development we do, first thing first is water. Water must be in the center of development in Africa and in Southern Africa. That's the first priority that we need to look at because that creates a lot of opportunities. It attracts investors. It also attracts tourism. Now, we have that synergy in the Southern Africa in terms of that. We have a very strong SADC region that we have even SADC strategies, particularly on water and water security and energy. And DBSA also have an infrastructure initiative funded by EU around developing of Southern Africa infrastructure initiative. I'm trying to say the strategies are there. What we need now is to roll our sleeves, coordinate this properly, a task team to deal with this effectively, and have a smart approach. I mean, for instance, South Africa have just adopted a national water and sanitation master plan. And that master plan must be replicated also in Lesotho, also in Mozambique, also in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and so forth. And that to me is already there. It's a matter that the countries must agree now that taking lesson from COVID-19, for instance, it was a very painful, Chris, when we watched in March 2019 people dying from Mozambique on the floods and Zimbabwe, and we didn't have early warning system. What COVID-19 also showed us is that we cannot work without technology anymore. So we need to have investment opportunities around technology as a game changer to the whole situation. So for me, Chris, the institutions are there. What we need to do is to revamp those institutions, change them to deal with the priorities that we need to have. And I think that's the opportunity, Chris, that we have. This is an opportunity created by this COVID-19 as well.
See, if I could come back to you at the DBSA, I just want to talk to you about what your view is on the strength of government coffers as we speak. Speaking about the floods there, you just sparked a memory. I mean, I covered the floods in 2000 in Mozambique. And one thing I remember very strongly was the SANDF from here was there in full force. They poured men, machines, everything into saving people's lives there. I was wondering the other day when I was watching the stories come out of Mozambique whether this country still has the coffers enough for such capacity to do such a job again. What's your view on that?
Sure. Look, it's been a tough decade or so, to speak for the country, and the coffers have really lost their power, largely also due to the fact that we've had slow growth, and so government's revenue mobilization has been quite constrained. And then this is why the importance of catalyzing and ensuring that we've got partnerships with private sector to fill that gap in terms of financing and the government's ability to deliver. And this is the only way that we're going to bridge the gaps through the public-private partnerships, through the catalyzing of funds, and also ensuring that we're not only just taking a national approach, but a regional approach, because whatever happens to our neighboring countries definitely affects us. Challenges in the Zimbabwean economy definitely have an effect on the region. And so apart from just ensuring that we coordinate the implementation and the development strategy, we also need to have a regional view on this. And in terms of the region, the funds are there. The DBSA also manages a SADC project preparation and development fund, which gets a lot of funding from international development partners in order to bridge the gaps that the governments in the region find themselves, including South Africa. So I think it's more about leveraging and taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented there, and making sure that we have efficient implementation to reduce losses, to reduce wastage, and make sure that we fill the gaps and reduce leakage. I think that's the only way forward: partnerships and efficient implementation. Chris?
And there's, I'd say, Dr. Tsibani, you've been talking about the importance of water. I remember a few years ago covering a story about how the water authorities here in South Africa were going to save water and save millions by fixing leaks. They said there was going to be thousands of artisans out there doing the decent thing. Some of these leaks date back 20, 25 years.
All what we need to do is that there must be a political will at a national and a provincial level to ensure that we sit out what Siya is called private-public partnership models that DBSA have championed over years, and it has worked. So we should not leave what is working. We should be consolidating and draw lessons on what is working and then implement and improve. So for me, Chris, dealing with this non-revenue water, we need to deal with the issues of artisan skills. We need to deal with the issues of build, operate, and train and transfer, and have a long-term contract that is well regulated, approved by DBSA and other developmental finance institution and treasury, so that it is regulated in a proper manner to address the local needs. It's not that people do not want to pay for water. This social protest is because sometimes you go to an area and you don't find the water. And the climate change is here with us. So we need to adapt to this climate change. And part of that is provide operation and maintenance to the private sector. The private sector can decentralize the systems, and therefore they can be able to deliver in a better manner. Sorry, Chris. Thank you.
I'm afraid that all that's what we've got time for in this edition. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. George Tsibani, an international capacity development and monitoring specialist, and Siya Biniza, a country specialist at the DBSA. And as I say, that's all we've got this edition of Building Africa's Prosperity. From me, Chris Bishop, it's goodbye.